All right, this is Morgan with winterwarfare.com, and welcome to the new world that we live in on the battlefield, where there is no longer a rear area. And so in today's video, I think I have something new to share with you, a different view on METT-TC and OAKOC. It's just a video that I'm going to call, I think, the METT-TC advantage. And what I actually have for you that I'm going to give to you at the end of this video is a document, and in this document what we're going to go over today is, I think, a good way to look at METT-TC and OAKOC, and that is, what are your advantages, what are your disadvantages. And so really what METT-TC and OAKOC are the factors of war. They're the variables of war. And what I have, as I mentioned, I'm going to leave this document with you. I'm going to leave a link to it. It's going to be on our website, winterwarfare.com. You don't need to buy anything. That's not what this video is about. This is just informational only for the guys out there. I think this video could potentially benefit professional soldiers and or your citizen soldier out there in the field, and looking at the lens of METT-TC and OAKOC in a little bit different manner again. So as I mentioned, METT-TC and OAKOC are basically looking at the variables of war, the factors of war. And what you want to do is go through each of the acronyms and weigh them. And that's essentially the checklist that I have for you. This checklist, the purpose of this, or my intent with this, and this is just my stab at it. There's always very, very smart guys, smarter than me, that watch these videos. But with that being said, this might be a starting point for you to look at or think about this in a different way. And as I've mentioned before in many of my other videos, I'm former Army infantry, former airborne. I did a little time doing that. I'm mainly just a normal guy, a professional citizen, I guess you could call it. But I do like to analyze things. I have a degree in economics, and I like to look at strategy. I like to look at winning, and these factors or variables that we're going to talk about today. And basically what I'm going to give you, as I mentioned, is a cheat sheet. And the intent of this cheat sheet is to go through each of these variables in METT-TC and OAKOC and check off, do I have the advantage or does the enemy have the advantage? And you want to weigh those. Do I have the advantage? Does the enemy have the advantage? And as we discuss this today, you have a couple options. If the enemy has the advantage, if you go through your checklist and mission, enemy has advantage, enemy has advantage, terrain and weather, enemy has advantage. You go through that checklist and the enemy has the advantage, you have two options. Option one is to either figure out how you get the advantage, or secondly, abort the mission. And so this document, I think, could be a very good field guide, a quick reference field guide for the guys out there. You could keep this with you. And so one thing I wanted to mention was, before we get started here real quick, I keep a little, this is a flight crew checklist, and this is just what I use. It's got insert folders and tabs, and I keep a lot of the information that I need. Why? Because, I don't always do this every day. There's things that I have to reference and remember, and this little checklist book, well, to make a very long story short, I'm giving you an expanded METT-TC and OAKOC tactical advantage, weighing checklist. I have a little mini version of that I keep, and so you could use this document to base your own mini advantage, disadvantage checklist as well, just like I keep in here. I don't keep the full one. Now, the other thing for you to consider in this video as we talk about these, let's just say you didn't want to keep something like this in your tactical field notes. This discussion, just this list alone, is going to spark some thoughts for you, some thoughts, and again, this is not just you, this is me included. When I make these things, or when I'm doing these things, it's usually something that I need to know. So this isn't preaching to anybody. This isn't. This is just trying to pass on some knowledge, trying to pass on maybe a different way of looking at things. And again, my goal all along is to have the advantage, or to know if I have the advantage, or to know if I should proceed or not proceed. So with all that being said, you might be the small unit leader that's going to be planning an operation, and METT-TC by itself and OAKOC are part of the military decision-making process, the intelligence preparation for the battlefield. METT-TC by itself can be used as a little mini version of the intelligence preparation for the battlefield, and so you might find yourself in the field needing to understand some of the critical points of these variables. Do I have the advantage? Does the enemy have the advantage? And so this checklist, what it's going to do is it's going to go through each of the acronyms of METT-TC, the M, E, T, T, and the T and the C, and also OAKOC. Once we get to OAKOC, I'm going to break off and I'll give you a little a quick reference formula for that. But what I was going to say is OAKOC is going to fit into the first T, which is the train and weather part of METT-TC. So OAKOC actually fits in there, in case you didn't know. All right, so the very first thing is, on my checklist, this is just a running checklist of, do I have the advantage? It's some questions that are going to prompt you. And again, you could take it a step further on your own, but these questions are meant not just for you, but for me as well. They're going to help prompt you in each of these sections of intelligence preparation of the battlefield, the METT-TC. Do I have the advantage, or does the enemy? So let's go ahead and just read through these. I don't think it'll take very long. If you'd like to download this, again, this will be on the winterwarfare.com website. Go to shop, and then you'll find it in other cool stuff, the other cool stuff tab. You don't need to buy anything. We have some other documents there. I have seen a couple guys come and just put in a dummy phone number or something. This isn't to collect information from you. You can put your information in there, and our website will actually send you out a 10% discount code to use on the website. But again, no, there's no obligation for that, and that's not the intent of this. I just need a place to host the documents. Okay, so we're going to start off with, obviously, mission. So first question, is the mission statement, task, and purpose clearly understood by all leaders? Yes or no? Do I have the advantage? Does the enemy have the advantage? Can the mission be realistically completed with the current personnel and resources? You know, do you have the right training and different things? And there's also a troop component that has some similar things. And again, you can change these and tweak these, add to it, take away from what you need. Also, under mission, does the mission align with our unit's role, type, and training? For example, are you light infantry, armor? Mission, are the tactical risks acceptable given the higher commander's objective? So, for example, maybe you're possibly working with a higher echelon. Maybe it's just you and your small team. You are the echelon. That may not be a factor. But if you're working with a higher echelon, yeah, you need to make sure that your plan is aligning with the higher, commander's intent, I guess you could say. In that, if the commander's intent is to, protect the civilian population, I don't want to have a plan where I'm, going, DEFCON 5 nuclear war in my plan. That's not going to align, for example. I'm just making a gross exaggeration. A couple more under the mission, or the first M in METT-TC. Is the desired end state clear? And does everyone know what success looks like? I think that's an important one. Again, I have a pretty extensive business background, and military planning is very, very similar to business planning. And when you go into a business situation, just like a military situation, before I even get there, I want to know, what's our goal? Okay, what's the end state look like? What does winning look like? The next and last mission on our list, are there constraints, rules of engagement, political, terrain access that could limit tactical options? Yes or no? Do I have the advantage? Does the enemy have the advantage? That's what I'm going through here. And I should also mention, at the end of this, you're going to tally up all your yeses and all your nos, and you're going to count them. And if you have a certain amount of yeses, that means you have the advantage. If you have a certain amount of, maybe an equal amount of yeses and nos, that could be, you know, contested. If you have a bunch of no's, you know, I don't have that, you don't have the advantage. You might want to reconsider your plan. And before we get to the next step, I should mention in that grading system for this, it's just a simple count. So use that with caution in that if you know what a simple average is, this is just that, okay? It's not putting any weight on any of these. It's not a weighted average at the end for the end scoring. So just use a little caution. There could be some things in here that have a little more weight, but just for simplicity, it's just a simple average to count up your advantages or disadvantages. So let's move on. The next E in METT-TC is enemy. And so let's look at a couple of the things where I'm going to want to consider if I have the advantage or disadvantage. Enemy. Is the enemy force, size, equipment, and type known? Are they overmatched by friendly forces? The next enemy component or factor to look at. Do we know where their forces are positioned or are moving? Enemy. Next factor. Can they conduct indirect fire, maneuver? Can they counterattack or use electronic warfare in this area of operation? Next enemy factor. Are there exploitable gaps in their formations, logistics, morale, or in their intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, or ISR? Is there gaps in that? The next enemy factor. Have the most probable and most dangerous enemy courses of action been identified and prepared for? And I'm going to just stop a second on that one. Courses of action, go back to the last video that we made on the military decision-making process made easy, and the very quick reference cheat sheet that we also made for the very elaborate strategy and tactical process that the United States military uses, the military decision-making process. In that process is where you're going to look at friendly and enemy courses of action, but that's also on this list as well, and so I'm just tying some things together. The next section is the first T in METT-TC, and that's going to be your terrain and weather. And at that point, I'm going to interject OAKOC into this. And the first O is observation in fields of fire, the first factor, I should say. And in that, do we control positions that allow observation of key terrain, enemy routes, or objectives? The second factor, again, still dealing with observation in fields of fire, the first O. Are our weapons effectively placed to cover enemy movement and dead space? The next area is going to be avenues of approach. And that is, are maneuver routes mounted or dismounted, open under friendly control? So are our routes where we're going to be moving through or from, are they controlled by us? Are they protected or not? And the last factor in avenues of approach, are these routes defensible, or can they be interdicted by an enemy force? The next factor we're going to move on to is the K, key terrain, in OAKOC. And for key terrain factor, the first one is there terrain that will significantly affect mission success if held or denied? Second factor, a key terrain. Do we currently hold or have a plan to seize that key terrain? The next factor in OAKOC, which is the O for obstacles. Are there obstacles, natural or man-made, that shape movement in our favor? The second factor for obstacles to consider. Do we have breaching or bypass capabilities for known obstacles or mines? The next factor we're going to move on to is the C in OAKOC, the cover and concealment. Does terrain provide protection from direct fire and observation? The next factor, cover and concealment. Can we maneuver undetected through terrain features, e.g. draws and vegetation? The next factor would be weather. Will current or forecasted weather impact visibility, mobility, or fire support? I can just tell you again really quickly, weather is the single biggest factor alone that can influence a tactical operation, and so it is something that we've talked about extensively on this channel. That's kind of the main purpose of winter warfare, is to bring awareness to that, to have the right gear to operate 24/7 in any environment. The next factor that we'll look at for weather is the enemy more degraded by weather than we are, yes or no? So those are the factors of OAKOC. And before I end there and jump back into METT-TC, I want to mention something really quick. This is a very simple formula that I learned, and the formula goes like this, and this is the formula for OAKOC to figure out what key terrain is. And one thing I'd mention with using OAKOC, and we'll just talk about this for 1 second. Key terrain is not everything. Every hilltop out here in the mountains where I am, every hilltop is not key terrain. And so let's define that a little bit, and I'll give you a very, very quick formula to do that. The first thing that I want to do to identify key terrain, and I have a very rudimentary map here. You'll see I have a hilltop right here. I have a road running through here. I have a obstacle, which is a bridge right here, and a stream. And so the first thing that I want to do in this little formula to figure out key terrain is I want to find my avenues of approach. So I have a road there. Roads are very long, and you cannot control an entire road, but you can control a point on a road. And when I look out at the area of operations that I'm in, it is some very, very thick forest. It would be very hard tactically. The mobility corridors, if you will, are extremely tight just because this is a heavily wooded, there's multiple layers of vegetation out here. And so for any significant type of operation, you or the enemy will be using roads, okay? And granted, yes, you can be a long-range reconnaissance patrol and go a long ways out here, okay? But you're still going to need some sustainment gear. So unless you're living off the land like Kit Carson did back in the day, or Lewis and Clark or something, even you and myself would have a very hard time being a long-range reconnaissance patrol group out here just going through the woods, which it is possible. It's just extremely time-consuming. And so to have any significant impact in a timely manner, you will have to use roads. So the first thing that you want to do to find key terrain is look at your roads and trails and roads, because people use them. The enemy will use them. Identify those. The second thing that you want to do is find obstacles. In this particular case, on my little map that I drew, there's a bridge. Obstacles can either be man-made, or they can be natural obstacles that are going to canalize you into a choke point, and they're going to restrict your movement. The third thing that I want to do in my key terrain formula is find observable spots or observation. And in this particular case, on my map, I happen to have a hillside right there. So in this case, I have all three. So the formula goes like this: avenues of approach plus obstacles plus observation equals key terrain. So in this particular case, my key terrain would be that hilltop, because I want to keep eyes on that obstacle. Why? Because that hilltop there would be the key terrain. The enemy is also going to use this as well. Obstacles are always going to be under observation. That is something for you to be aware of. An obstacle will be under observation. So if you're going through a very tight pass on a road, you're going across a bridge, those are going to be under observation. You should be aware of that. You should identify where the observation of that might be coming from. And in another case, you might need to be the one observing it, and or you should understand that the enemy is going to be observing it. So if there's an obstacle, you might want to avoid that if it's possible. Okay, that's why I'm bringing this little interjection into the conversation. Okay, so let's move on to another T in the METT-TC part of our factors or variables of war and our assessment of whether we have an advantage or not. The next T is troops and support. Do we have sufficient strength to accomplish the mission or phase? The next factor of, and we're going to use troops and support, are weapons systems, radios, optics, and sustainment assets combat ready? Yeah, that's something for you to consider. If you're a hokey pokey ragtag volunteer unit, you know, tattered together with duct tape and baling wire, it might be a consideration for you to think about who you're going to be trying to engage, or if you should engage them if you don't have the right gear and equipment. The next factor, once again, using troops and support, is the unit organized effectively? Example, support by fire, assault, security, yes or no? Do I have the advantage? Does the enemy have the advantage? The next factor, troops and support. Are troops trained and mentally prepared for the conditions? Mountains, urban, cold, okay? Many of the things that we've talked about, you see how some of these things all work together. The next factor, looking at troops and support. Are support assets like engineers, medics, motors, or drones available and integrated? Some of these things may or may not apply to you depending on who you are or what group you're with. The next factor, and it's going to be the last T in METT-TC, which is time, that I'm going to want to look at. Do we have enough time to conduct full troop leading procedures? The next factor, using time, is the mission timeline realistic for movement, setup, and completion? Again, going back to looking at your terrain and using OAKOC or OAKOC, moving through the woods is going to slow you down significantly. If it's a winter environment and I have my skis and snowshoes on, it's going to take me more than 10 minutes to go 20 clicks, okay? So you have to factor all those things in to your planning and considerations. The next T or factor that we're going to look at is staying on time, the last one. Are key tasks, fires, maneuvement, breach, properly timed and deconflicted? So for example, if I'm going to attack an enemy position, if they have obstacles and things like that, I have to take that into my consideration in my planning. Do they have booby traps set up? Are there minefields? Do we have a breaching team? Different things like that. Now we only have a couple more. We're going to look at the last factors or variables of advantage or disadvantage with METT-TC, which is the C for civilian, and so there's a couple of these to consider. Will local civilians affect or be affected by friendly operations? These could be also somewhat political, in that if you are an insurgent or even a counterinsurgent, the local population, this isn't just these C's or the civilian factors that we're going to look at. You know, people could be tattletelling on you because they don't like you. You need to be aware of the sentiment, the political environment, what you're doing. That's the trying to win the hearts and minds of people conversation, which is a whole nother topic. The next factor to look at in civilian considerations: do rules of engagement or other legal political restrictions affect our freedom of maneuver? The next factor in civilian considerations are civilian roads, bridges, communications supporting or interfering with the mission. And the very last one in this discussion today for civilian considerations, are there population dynamics, tribal, religious, political, that affect our mission, yes or no? And so again, you'll go through each of these, check yes or no. And then there's a scoring system at the very back. Again, use caution with that scoring system. You now will have access to this document. Use caution with the scoring system simply because it's a simple average. It's not a weighted average. None of these were weighted. There's no special weight on any one of these, although there probably could be. And with that being said, hopefully my goal in this conversation is to take you and your small leadership team to a much higher level of planning a successful tactical operation. Very simply, again, this is a cheat sheet. This is a cheat sheet to, again, go back to the beginning of the conversation. METT-TC and OAKOC are a mini part of the intelligence preparation for battlefield. I also want to encourage you to go back to the last video that we made on the small unit leaders easy reference guide using military decision-making process, where you look at intelligence preparation for battlefield, or we discuss that, courses of action. We put a very simple civilianized, if you will, op order in there that you can use. So all these documents are to help the small unit leaders out there go much higher in their planning, much higher in their ability, very quickly, all summarized, have a cheat sheet. And so I think with that, I'm very thankful for you guys out there. I want to wrap this up. Once again, this is Morgan with winterwarfare.com. I'm very thankful for everybody out there, and Morgan out.